It was a Tuesday afternoon, and 12-year-old Danny was making his way home from Lincoln Middle School just like he did every day. The sun was shining, and he could hear kids laughing in the playground behind him as he rolled down Maple Street in his wheelchair. Danny had gotten pretty good at navigating the cracked sidewalks in his neighborhood over the past 3 years. He knew exactly which curbs had the best ramps and which potholes to avoid, but today was different. Today, something was wrong. Danny felt it first as a strange wobble in his front wheel. He slowed down, thinking maybe he had run over a rock or a piece of trash. He looked down but couldn't see anything obvious. The wheelchair had been acting up lately, making weird noises and feeling harder to push, but his mom kept saying they would deal with it later. Money was tight, and there were always more pressing things to worry about. As Danny continued down the street, the wobbling got worse. He gripped the wheel rims tighter, trying to maintain control. The old wheelchair had been donated to their family by a local charity when Danny was 9, and while they were grateful to have it, it had seen better days. The paint was chipped, the padding was worn thin, and lately it seemed like something new was breaking every week. Suddenly, without any warning, the front wheel locked up completely. The wheelchair lurched to a violent stop, and Danny felt himself being thrown forward. Time seemed to slow down as he realized what was happening. His hands flew out instinctively to break his fall as he tumbled onto the concrete sidewalk. His backpack flew off his shoulders, scattering his homework papers across the pavement like confetti. Danny lay there for a moment, catching his breath and taking inventory of his body. His palms were scraped and stinging, and his knee was bleeding through a fresh hole in his jeans. But more than the physical pain, he felt embarrassed and frustrated. A few people across the street had stopped to stare, and Danny could feel his cheeks burning red. He tried to push himself up to a sitting position and looked back at his wheelchair. The front wheel was sitting at an odd angle, and he could see that something metal was sticking out where it shouldn't be. Even from his limited view on the ground, Danny could tell this wasn't something that could be fixed with duct tape or a quick adjustment. The 13-year-old felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. This was exactly the kind of problem his family couldn't afford to deal with right now. His mom, Rosa, was already working 2 jobs just to keep up with their rent and groceries. She cleaned offices downtown in the early mornings before most people were even awake, and then worked at a grocery store until evening. The last thing she needed was another expensive problem. As Danny sat there trying to figure out what to do next, he heard heavy footsteps approaching. He looked up to see a tall man in dark blue coveralls walking toward him. The man's hands and clothes were stained with grease, and there was a concerned expression on his weathered face. "Hey there, son. Are you okay?" the man asked, his voice gentle but worried. Danny nodded quickly, not wanting to be a bother. "Yeah, I'm fine, just my wheelchair acting up again." The man knelt down beside Danny, and the boy could smell motor oil and something that reminded him of his grandfather's garage. "I'm Bill Thompson. I own the auto repair shop right across the street there," the man said, pointing to a small building with a faded sign that read Thompson's Auto Repair. "I saw what happened from my office window. That looked like a pretty hard fall." Bill helped Danny sit up properly and handed him his scattered homework papers. "Let me take a look at this wheelchair of yours," he said, walking around to examine the damaged wheel. Danny watched as Bill crouched down and studied the problem with the same careful attention he probably gave to broken car engines. The mechanic's thick fingers traced along the wheel assembly, and he made little clicking sounds with his tongue as he discovered each new issue. "Well, I can see what happened here," Bill said after a few minutes. "Your axle has snapped clean through, and it looks like your brake mechanism is completely seized up too. This old girl has been working hard for you, hasn't she?" Danny nodded, feeling defensive about his wheelchair despite its obvious problems. "It usually works okay. We've had it for a while now." Bill stood up and wiped his hands on a rag from his pocket. "How far do you live from here, son?" "Just about 6 blocks down on Oak Street," Danny replied, pointing in the direction of his, neighborhood. "Well, we can't have you trying to get home in this thing. It's not safe, and besides, it won't roll properly with that wheel all twisted up like that." Bill looked thoughtful for a moment. "Tell you what, why don't you let me give you a ride? Home? I've got my truck right there, and we can load your wheelchair in the back." Danny hesitated. His mom had always taught him to be careful about accepting help from strangers, but something about Bill seemed trustworthy. Maybe it was the way he had immediately come to help, or the genuine concern in his eyes. But Danny found himself nodding. Okay, that would be really helpful. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Bill smiled for the first time since approaching Danny. Just call me Bill. And you are? Danny Rodriguez. Well, Danny Rodriguez, let's get you home safe. Bill helped Danny transfer into the passenger seat of his pickup truck, which smelled like coffee and had classic rock playing softly on the radio. The mechanic was surprisingly gentle as he lifted the broken wheelchair into the truck bed, securing it carefully with bungee cords. As they drove through Danny's neighborhood, Bill asked casual questions about school and Danny's interests. The boy found himself relaxing and even laughing at Bill's stories about the funny things that happened at his repair shop. It felt good to talk to an adult who seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. When they pulled up in front of Danny's small duplex, Rosa was just getting home from her morning job. She looked surprised and a little worried to see her son getting out of an unfamiliar truck. Bill quickly introduced himself and explained what had happened. Rosa's face went through a series of emotions as she processed the information. Relief that Danny wasn't seriously hurt, gratitude toward Bill for helping, and worry about what they were going to do about the wheelchair. I really appreciate you bringing him home, Rosa said, her voice tired but sincere. I don't know what we would have done. Bill waved off her thanks and helped unload the wheelchair. As he set it down, Rosa could see the extent of the damage for the first time. Her face fell as she realized this wasn't something that could be fixed easily or cheaply. Listen, Bill said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. I know we just met, but I was wondering if you might let me take a look at this wheelchair back at my shop. I work on all kinds of mechanical things, not just cars. Rosa started to shake her head. Oh no. We couldn't ask you to do that. We can't afford to pay for repairs right now. Bill held up his hand. Who said anything about payment? Sometimes a person just wants to help out a neighbor. And that simple offer, made by a kind-hearted mechanic on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, was about to change everything for Danny and his family in ways they never could have imagined. Rosa stood there on her front porch, looking at this stranger who had just offered to help fix her son's wheelchair for free. In her experience, nothing in life came without a price, and she had learned to be careful about accepting help from people she didn't know. But there was something about Bill Thompson that felt different. Maybe it was the way he had gently helped Danny out of the truck, or how he had taken the time to really listen when her son explained what happened. I really don't know, Rosa said, wrapping her arms around herself. We've never met before, and I can't just let you work on Danny's wheelchair without paying you something. Bill chuckled and scratched his beard. Ma'am, I've been fixing things for 35 years. Started when I was Danny's age, actually, helping my dad in his garage. Sometimes you just know when something needs to be done and you do it. No strings attached. Danny looked back and forth between his mom and Bill. He could see his mother's hesitation, but he could also see how tired she looked. She had been up since 4 in the morning for her cleaning job, and she still had to work at the grocery store later that evening. Mom, Danny said quietly, maybe we should let him try. It's not like it can get any more broken. Rosa sighed and looked down at the twisted wheelchair. Danny was right. The chair was completely unusable in its current condition, and they had no other options. She couldn't afford to take time off work to research repair shops. And even if she could, she knew they didn't have money for professional wheelchair repairs. Okay, she said finally, but only if you let me cook you dinner or something to say thank you. Bill's face lit up with a genuine smile. Now that's an offer I might just take you up on. I haven't had a home-cooked meal in longer than I care to admit. They arranged for Bill to pick up the wheelchair the next morning before Rosa left for work. As his truck disappeared down the street, Rosa found herself hoping she had made the right decision. Danny seemed excited about the possibility of getting his chair fixed, and Rosa didn't want to disappoint him if things didn't work out. The next morning, Bill arrived right on time. He loaded the wheelchair into his truck with the same care he had shown the day before, promising Rosa he would call if he had any questions. Back at Thompson's Auto Repair, Bill cleared a space in the corner of his shop specifically for Danny's wheelchair. He had told his regular customers that he might be a little slower with their cars for the next few days because he had a special project to work on. When Bill really examined the wheelchair in the bright lights of his shop, he realized the situation was worse than he had initially thought. This wasn't just a matter of fixing a broken axle. The entire chair had been well used for years, and there were problems everywhere he looked. The brake cables were frayed and barely holding together. The bearings in both wheels were completely worn out, which explained why the chair had been getting harder for Danny to push. The seat cushion was compressed and offered no real support anymore. Even the frame had stress cracks in several places that could become dangerous if they weren't addressed. Any other person might have called Rosa and explained that the chair was beyond repair. A new wheelchair would be the sensible solution. But Bill wasn't any other person. He spent his lunch break that first day driving to 3 different medical supply stores, learning about wheelchair specifications and safety requirements. He took photos of Danny's chair and showed them to the technicians, asking questions about proper measurements and adjustments. That evening, after his last customer had picked up their car, Bill stayed late to work on the wheelchair. He started by completely disassembling it, laying out every piece on a clean tarp so he could see exactly what he was dealing with. The second day, Bill drove 40 minutes to a specialty shop that sold wheelchair parts. He bought new bearings, cables, and brake components. When the salesperson asked what kind of repair shop he ran, Bill just smiled and said he was helping out a neighbor. Bill worked on the wheelchair every evening that week. He replaced the worn bearings with high quality, ones that would last for years. He installed a completely new brake system that would be more reliable and easier for Danny to operate. He welded the stress cracks in the frame and reinforced the areas that took the most pressure. But Bill didn't stop there. He had noticed how Danny struggled to reach his backpack when it was hanging on the back of his chair, so Bill designed and built a small storage compartment that would be easier to access. He found that the original seat was too low for someone Danny's height, so he modified the frame to raise it to a more comfortable position. On Friday evening, Bill realized he didn't know what Danny's favorite color was. The wheelchair had been painted institutional gray, probably because it was cheaper for the charity that had donated it. Bill wanted to do something special, but he needed to know what color Danny would actually like. The next morning, he called Rosa and asked if he could stop by to check a measurement on Danny's old chair. When he arrived, he casually mentioned that he was thinking about giving the wheelchair a fresh coat of paint. "What's Danny's favorite color?" he asked, trying to sound like it wasn't important. Danny's eyes lit up immediately. "Blue, like really, bright blue, like the color of those sports cars that drive by sometimes." Bill nodded seriously, as if he was filing away crucial technical information. "Electric blue. Got it." That weekend, Bill drove to an automotive paint shop and bought the best electric blue paint they had. It was the same paint used on high-end cars, designed to be durable and fade-resistant. Bill spent Sunday afternoon carefully painting the wheelchair frame. He applied 3 coats, sanding lightly between each one to ensure a perfect finish. When he was done, the wheelchair looked better than it had when it was brand new. But Bill still wasn't finished. He had been thinking about how isolated Danny might feel when his wheelchair broke down, and how Rosa had mentioned they couldn't afford repairs. Bill went to a hardware store and put together a small toolkit specifically for wheelchair maintenance. He included the basic tools Danny would need, along with spare cables and a few replacement parts. Bill also typed up a simple maintenance guide, explaining how to check the brakes and keep the wheels properly aligned. He wanted Danny to feel confident about taking care of his chair, and to understand that he didn't have to wait for something to break completely before addressing it. On Monday evening, exactly 1 week after he had first met Danny, Bill called. "Rosa, the wheelchair is ready," he said simply. Rosa could hardly believe it had only been a week. "Are you sure? That seems really fast." Bill laughed. "Well, I might have put in a few extra hours. Would tomorrow evening work for me to bring it by? Danny should be home from school by then." When Bill's truck pulled up in front of their house the next day, Danny practically flew out the front door. Rosa followed more slowly, still not quite believing this was really happening. Bill lowered the tailgate of his truck, and both Danny and Rosa gasped at what they saw. The wheelchair, gleaming in the afternoon sun, looked like something from a medical equipment showroom. The electric blue paint was so vibrant it almost seemed to glow, and every piece of metal had been polished, until it shined. "Oh my goodness," Rosa whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. Danny was speechless, reaching out to touch the perfect paint job as if he couldn't believe it was real. Bill helped Danny transfer into the chair, and the difference was immediately obvious. The wheelchair rolled so smoothly it felt like it was floating. The new height put Danny in a much more comfortable position, and the upgraded brake system responded perfectly to his touch. "There's more," Bill said, showing Danny the new storage compartment and the toolkit. He spent 20 minutes explaining basic maintenance, teaching Danny how to check for problems before they became serious. As Danny rolled around their small yard, testing out his new wheelchair, Rosa found herself crying. She tried to wipe away the tears before anyone noticed, but Bill had seen them. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know how to thank you enough." Bill watched Danny laughing as he practiced quick turns in his chair. Seeing that smile is thanks. Enough for me. The days following Danny's wheelchair repair were like nothing the Rodriguez family had experienced before. For the first time in years, Danny could get around without constantly worrying about his chair breaking down or getting stuck. The smooth rolling wheels made everything easier, from navigating the hallways at school to keeping up with his friends during lunch break. But what surprised Danny most was how much faster he could move now. The old wheelchair had been such a struggle that he had gotten used to moving slowly and carefully. Now, with the properly aligned wheels and new bearings, he could actually race his friends to class and win. "Danny, slow down," his teacher, Mrs. Peterson, called out as he zoomed past her in the hallway. But she was smiling when she said it, happy to see him so excited and confident. At home, Rosa noticed the change in her son immediately. Danny had always been a cheerful kid, but lately he seemed to carry himself differently. He sat up straighter in his chair, and he talked more about his day at school. The constant stress of wondering when the wheelchair would break down next had been weighing on all of them more than Rosa had realized. 3 days after getting his chair back, Danny made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going straight home from school, he took a detour down Maple Street and stopped in front of Thompson's Auto Repair. Through the open garage door, Danny could see Bill working under the hood of an old pickup truck. The shop smelled like motor oil and metal, and there were tools hanging on every wall. Danny had never been inside an auto repair shop before, and he found himself fascinated by all the different machines and equipment. "Well, look who's here," Bill said, rolling out from under the truck on a creeper. His face was streaked with grease, but he was grinning widely. "How's that chair treating you, Danny?" "It's amazing," Danny said, rolling into the shop. "It's like having a completely different wheelchair. I can actually keep up with everyone now." Bill wiped his hands on a rag and gestured around the shop. "Want to see what I'm working on? This old truck hasn't run in 2 years, but the owner doesn't want to give up on it." For the next hour, Bill showed Danny around the shop, explaining how different tools worked and what they were used for. Danny was surprised by how much he enjoyed learning about engines and mechanical systems. Everything seemed to connect in logical ways, like a puzzle where each piece had a specific purpose. "You know," Bill said as they looked at the truck's engine. "Fixing things isn't really that different from solving math problems. You have to figure out what's wrong, understand how all the parts work together, and then find the right solution." Danny had never thought about mechanics that way before, but it made perfect sense. He was actually pretty good at math, and he found himself asking Bill question after question about how engines worked. When Danny finally headed home that evening, Bill called out, "Feel free to stop by anytime, son. I could always use an extra pair of hands around here." The next day, Danny stopped by the shop again, and the day after that. Within a week, it had become part of his daily routine. He would finish his homework at one of the workbenches while Bill worked on cars, asking questions and learning about different types of repairs. Bill had never been married and didn't have any children of his own. He had always wondered what it would be like to pass on his knowledge to someone who was genuinely interested in learning. Having Danny around the shop brought an energy and curiosity that Bill hadn't realized he was missing. "Hand me that socket wrench, would you?" Bill would say, and Danny would quickly find the right tool and pass it over. Soon, Danny could identify most of the common tools just by looking. at them. Rosa was initially worried about Danny spending so much time at the repair shop. She didn't want him to be a bother to Bill, who had already done so much for their family. But when she stopped by the shop one evening to pick Danny up, she saw something that made her change her mind. Danny was sitting in his wheelchair next to Bill, both of them focused on a car manual spread out on the workbench. Bill was explaining something about brake systems, drawing little diagrams on a piece of paper to illustrate his points. Danny was asking thoughtful questions and taking notes in a small notebook he had started carrying. You know, Bill was saying, the brake system on a car works on the same basic principles as the brakes on your wheelchair. It's all about using pressure to create friction and convert motion into heat. Danny nodded seriously, writing down everything. Bill said. Rosa had never seen her son so engaged in learning something outside of school. I hope he's not getting in your way, Rosa said when Bill noticed her standing in the doorway. Are you kidding? Bill replied. This kid has a natural understanding of how things work. He asks better questions than some of the mechanics I used to work with. Rosa felt a surge of pride. She had always known Danny was smart, but she had never seen his intelligence applied to something so practical and hands-on. As the weeks went by, Danny became a regular fixture at Thompson's Auto Repair. Other customers got used to seeing the kid in the bright blue wheelchair helping Bill with various tasks. Some of them started asking Danny questions about their cars, and they were surprised by how much he had learned. That boy of yours is something special, Mrs. Chen told Rosa one day at the grocery store where Rosa worked. My husband brought his car to Bill's shop last week, and your Danny explained why the engine was making that weird noise. Turned out, he was exactly right. Danny was learning more than just mechanical skills, though. Bill was teaching him about problem solving, patience, and attention to detail. When Danny got frustrated because he couldn't understand something right away, Bill would remind him that the best mechanics were the ones who took their time and thought things through carefully. There's no shame in not knowing something, Bill would say. The shame is in not asking questions or giving up too easily. One afternoon, while Danny was organizing tools in the shop, Bill made a phone call that Danny couldn't help but overhear. Bill was talking to someone named David, and from the conversation it sounded like they were brothers who didn't talk very often. You should see this kid, David, Bill was saying. 12 years old and already thinking like an engineer. He's got this natural curiosity about how things work, and he's not afraid to get his hands dirty. Danny tried not to listen, but he couldn't help being curious about who Bill was talking to and why he was talking about him. I know, Bill continued. It's been too long since we talked. But I'm telling you, this boy reminds me of us, when we were kids, always taking things apart to see how they worked. Remember that old radio we found in Dad's garage? There was a long pause as Bill listened to whoever was on the other end of the line. Actually, I was thinking about sending you some pictures, Bill said. Maybe a video of him explaining how a transmission works. You'd be impressed, trust me. When Bill hung up the phone, he seemed thoughtful for a moment. Then he turned back to Danny, who was pretending to be very focused on sorting screws by size. Danny, Bill said, how would you feel about me taking some pictures of you working on stuff here in the shop? Nothing fancy, just some shots of you with the tools and maybe a video of you explaining something you've learned. Danny looked up, surprised. Why would you want to do that? Well, Bill said, choosing his words carefully. I've got a brother who lives far away, and I don't get to talk to him much. But I think he'd be really interested to hear about what you're learning here. He's always been interested in young people who show promise in technical fields. Danny shrugged. Sure, I guess that would be okay, as long as my mom says it's all right. That evening, Bill called Rosa to ask permission. He explained that his brother David lived in Colorado and worked with technology companies. He didn't go into details about what David did for work, but he made it clear that he was proud of Danny's progress and wanted to share it with family. Rosa agreed, though she wasn't entirely sure why Bill's brother would be interested in pictures of her son. Still, Bill had been nothing but kind to their family, and she trusted his judgment. Over the next few days, Bill took several pictures of Danny working in the shop and recorded a short video of him explaining how to check brake fluid levels. Danny was a little nervous at first, but Bill made him feel comfortable by asking him to just explain things the way he would to a friend. What neither Rosa nor Danny knew was that Bill's brother David wasn't just interested in technology. He was the founder and CEO of one of the most innovative mobility device companies in the country, and he had been looking for young people who showed exceptional promise in engineering and problem-solving. When Bill sent those pictures and videos to his brother, he had no idea that he was about to set in motion a series of events that would change Danny's life forever. 3 weeks had passed since Bill started taking pictures and videos of Danny working in the shop. Life had settled into a comfortable routine for the Rodriguez family. Danny would go to school, stop by Thompson's Auto Repair to help Bill and learn about engines, then head home to do his homework. Rosa was working her usual double shifts, but she felt more at peace knowing Danny was spending his afternoons in a safe place with someone who cared about him. On a Thursday morning, while Rosa was getting ready for her early cleaning job, the phone rang. She glanced at the clock and frowned. Nobody ever called their house at 5:30 in the morning unless something was wrong. "Hello?" Rosa answered cautiously, worried it might be an emergency. "Good morning, Mrs. Rodriguez. My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I'm calling from Premier Aviation Services," said a professional-sounding woman on the other end of the line. Rosa's frown deepened. She had never heard of Premier Aviation Services, and she couldn't imagine why they would be calling her. "I'm sorry, I think you might have the wrong number." "No, ma'am, I have the correct number. I'm calling about you and your son, Danny. We have been asked to arrange transportation for both of you to Colorado this weekend." Rosa sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. This had to be some kind of mistake, or maybe even a scam. "I'm sorry, but I have no idea what you're talking about. We haven't arranged any trip to Colorado." "I understand this might be confusing," Jennifer said patiently. "The arrangements have been made by Mitchell Technologies as part of a special opportunity for Danny. We would like to send a private aircraft to pick you up on Saturday morning." "A private aircraft?" Rosa repeated, wondering if she was still dreaming. "Listen, I don't know what kind of scam this is, but we're not interested. Mrs. Rodriguez, I completely understand your concern. This does sound unusual. May I suggest you contact Bill Thompson at Thompson's Auto Repair? He should be able to help clarify the situation." Rosa's heart skipped a beat. How did this stranger know about Bill? "How do you know Bill Thompson?" "Mr. Thompson's brother, David Mitchell, is the one who has arranged this trip. If you could speak with Mr. Thompson, I think he can help explain everything. I'll call you back this afternoon to see if you have any questions." After Jennifer hung up, Rosa sat staring at the phone for several minutes. She had never heard Bill mention a brother named David, and she certainly had never heard of Mitchell Technologies. The whole thing sounded too strange to be real. But the woman had known about Bill, and she had known Danny's name. Rosa decided she needed to call Bill as soon as his shop opened. At 8 o'clock sharp, Rosa called Thompson's Auto Repair. "Bill, it's Rosa Rodriguez. I just got the strangest phone call, and the woman said I should talk to you about it." Rosa explained the entire conversation, and there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Oh boy," Bill finally said. "I think I know what this is about. Rosa, can you come down to the shop? This is something I need to explain in person." 20 minutes later, Rosa was sitting in Bill's small office while he poured her a cup of coffee, with slightly shaking hands. "I should have told you about this earlier," Bill began. "My brother David lives in Colorado, and he runs a company that makes advanced wheelchairs and other mobility devices. I've been sending him those pictures and videos of Danny because I thought he might be interested in Danny's mechanical aptitude." Rosa stared at him. "What exactly does that mean?" "Well, David's company works with young people who show promise in engineering and technology. They have scholarship programs and internship opportunities. I thought maybe Danny might qualify for something like that in a few years." "And you didn't think to mention this to me?" Rosa's voice was rising slightly. Bill held up his hands. I know. I should have been more upfront about it, but honestly, I didn't expect David to respond so quickly or so dramatically. I certainly didn't expect him to send a private jet." Rosa rubbed her temples. "Bill, We can't afford to take time off work for a trip to Colorado. And even if we could, I don't know anything about this company or what they want with Danny. Rosa, David is my brother. I've known him my whole life. He's a good man who genuinely wants to help young people succeed. If he's going to this much trouble to meet Danny, it means he sees something special in those videos I sent. But a private jet? That seems excessive for a 12-year-old kid. Bill smiled for the first time since Rosa had arrived. You don't know my brother. When David gets excited about something, he goes all out. He's been successful enough that money isn't really an issue for him anymore. If he wants to fly you to Colorado on a private jet, it's because he thinks Danny is worth it. Rosa was quiet, for a long moment processing everything Bill had told her. What kind of opportunity are we talking about? I honestly don't know, Bill admitted. David didn't give me details, but knowing him, it's probably something that could help Danny's future in ways we can't even imagine right now. That afternoon, Jennifer Walsh called back as promised. This time, Rosa was ready with questions. What exactly does Mitchell Technologies do? Rosa asked. We design and manufacture state-of-the-art mobility devices and assistive technology, Jennifer explained. Mr. Mitchell started the company 15 years ago with the goal of creating products that give people more independence and better quality of life. And why is Mr. Mitchell interested in my son? From what I understand, Danny has shown exceptional aptitude for understanding mechanical systems and problem-solving. Mr. Mitchell is always looking for young people who might benefit from educational opportunities in technology and engineering. Rosa asked several more questions about the company, the trip details, and what would be expected of them. Jennifer was patient and professional, providing clear answers to everything Rosa wanted to know. The aircraft would pick you up Saturday morning at the regional airport and return you Sunday evening, Jennifer explained. All meals and accommodations would be provided and there would be no cost to you whatsoever. Can I think about it and call you back? Rosa asked. Of course, but I do need to know by tomorrow morning so we can finalize the flight arrangements. That evening, Rosa sat Danny down and explained the entire situation. Danny's eyes grew wider with each detail. A private jet? Danny said when Rosa finished. Like the ones movie stars use? That's what the woman said. But Danny, this is a big decision. I don't want you to get your hopes up too high. We don't really know what this company wants or what kind of opportunity they're talking about. Danny was quiet for a moment, thinking. Mom, do you trust Bill? Rosa considered the question carefully. Yes, I do trust Bill. He's been nothing but kind to our family. And this is Bill's brother we're talking about? That's what Bill says. Danny nodded slowly. Then I think we should go. Even if nothing comes of it. How many kids get to ride? On a private jet? And maybe we'll learn something interesting about the company. Rosa looked at her son's excited face and realized she had already made her decision. Danny was right. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, regardless of what came of it. The next morning, Rosa called Jennifer Walsh and accepted the invitation. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, but Danny had been awake since dawn. He had never been on any kind of airplane before, let alone a private jet. Rosa was nervous about flying, but she was trying not to let Danny see her anxiety. Bill offered to drive them to the airport, and during the ride, he kept reassuring Rosa that everything would be fine. David's a good guy, Bill said for the third time. Whatever he has planned, it's going to be something positive for Danny. At the regional airport, they were directed to a small building separate from the main terminal. A man in a crisp uniform greeted them and led them outside to where a sleek white aircraft was waiting on the tarmac. Danny stared at the jet in amazement. It was smaller than the commercial airplanes he had seen in movies, but it looked incredibly sophisticated and expensive. Good morning, Mrs. Rodriguez, Danny, said a woman approaching them. I'm Captain Martinez, and I'll be flying you to Colorado today. Are you ready for an adventure? As they climbed the stairs into the aircraft, Danny couldn't believe what he was seeing. The interior looked like a luxury living room, with comfortable leather seats and small tables. There were only about 8 seats total, and each one looked like it could recline into a bed. This is incredible, Danny whispered to his mother as they settled into their seats. A flight attendant offered them beverages and explained the safety procedures. Rosa kept looking around in disbelief, wondering how her life had led to this moment. As the jet taxied down the runway and lifted into the air, Danny pressed his face to the window and watched the ground fall away below them. He had dreamed about flying before, but the reality was even more amazing than he had imagined. "Mom," Danny said softly, not taking his eyes off the clouds outside. "No matter what happens when we get to Colorado, this is already the best day of my life." Rosa squeezed her son's hand and hoped that whatever David Mitchell had planned would live up to Danny's excitement. She had no idea that they were flying toward an opportunity that would change their lives in ways she never could have dreamed possible. The private jet touched down at a small airport outside Denver after a smooth 2-hour flight. Danny had spent most of the trip staring out the window in amazement, watching the landscape change from the flat farmland of his home state to the dramatic mountains of Colorado. As they descended the steps from the aircraft, a black luxury car was waiting for them on the tarmac. The driver, a friendly man named Robert, helped load Danny's wheelchair and opened the doors for them. "Welcome to Colorado," Robert said with a warm smile. "Mr. Mitchell is very excited to meet you both." The drive took them through downtown Denver and then into an area filled with modern office buildings and technology companies. Rosa watched the scenery pass by, still not quite believing this was really happening. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked Robert. "To Mitchell Technologies headquarters. It's about 15 minutes from here. You'll love the facility. It's one of the most advanced research and development centers in the country." Danny pressed his face to the window as they pulled into a parking lot in front of a sleek glass building. The sign out front read, "Mitchell Technologies Advancing Human Mobility," in bold letters. "This place is huge," Danny said, craning his neck to see the top of the building. Robert helped them out of the car and led them through the main entrance. The lobby was bright and spacious, with displays showcasing various mobility devices and assistive technologies. Danny's eyes were immediately drawn to a futuristic-looking wheelchair that seemed to move by itself. "Is that wheelchair driving itself?" Danny asked, pointing at the display. "That's one of our newest prototypes," said a voice behind them. "It uses sensors and artificial intelligence to help navigate obstacles and stairs." They turned to see a man in his early 50s approaching them. He was tall and had the same kind eyes as Bill, though his hair was grayer and he was dressed in an expensive-looking suit instead of coveralls. "You must be Danny," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm David Mitchell, Bill's younger brother. And Mrs. Rodriguez, it's such a pleasure to meet you." Rosa shook David's hand, still feeling overwhelmed by everything that was happening. "Thank you for bringing us here. Though I have to admit I'm still not entirely sure why we're here." David smiled. "I promise everything will make sense very soon. But first, would you like a tour of our facility? I think Danny might find it interesting." For the next hour, David led them through the Mitchell Technologies building. They saw laboratories where engineers were designing new wheelchair components, testing facilities where products were put through rigorous safety checks, and workshops where skilled technicians were building custom devices for individual clients. Danny was fascinated by everything he saw. The engineers were happy to explain their work, and Danny asked intelligent questions that impressed everyone they met. "How do you make the wheels so quiet?" Danny asked one engineer who was working on a prototype. "We use special bearings and materials that reduce friction," the engineer explained. "It's the same principle your friend Bill used when he fixed your wheelchair, just taken to the next level." In one laboratory, they watched a team testing a wheelchair that could climb stairs by itself. In another, engineers were developing a device that would allow wheelchair users to stand up safely and easily. "This is incredible," Rosa whispered to David, as they watched Danny examining a 3D printer that was creating wheelchair parts. "He's never seen anything like this before." "Neither had I when I was his age," David replied. "But that's exactly why I wanted him to see it. Young people with Danny's kind of curiosity and mechanical understanding are the future of this industry." After the tour, David led them to his office on the top floor of the building. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows with a stunning view of the Rocky Mountains, and the walls were covered with awards and photos of people using Mitchell Technologies devices. "Please, have a seat," David said, gesturing to a comfortable seating area. Rosa, Danny, I want to tell you why I asked you to come here. David sat down across from them and leaned forward. A few weeks ago, Bill S. sent me some videos of Danny working in his shop. I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've met thousands of young people interested in engineering and technology. But I've rarely seen someone Danny's age demonstrate such a natural understanding of mechanical systems. Danny looked down at his hands, embarrassed by the praise. More importantly, David continued, Bill told me about Danny's situation and how the wheelchair repair changed his life. That story reminded me why I started this company in the first place. David stood up and walked to his desk, picking up a framed photograph. It showed a young boy in a wheelchair, smiling at the camera. This is me when I was 10 years old, David said, showing them the picture. I was born with a condition that affected my legs, and I used a wheelchair until I was 16. Back then, the technology wasn't nearly as advanced as it is today. Kids like me had very limited options. Rosa and Danny looked at the photograph in surprise. David moved around the office so naturally that they never would have guessed he had once used a wheelchair. I was lucky enough to have surgery that helped me walk again, but I never forgot what it was like to depend on a wheelchair for mobility. That's why I started this company, to create better options for people who need mobility assistance. David sat back down and looked directly at Danny. Bill tells me you're interested in how things work and that you're good at solving problems. Is that true? Danny nodded. I like figuring out how engines work and why things break. Bill has been teaching me a lot about mechanical systems. What would you say if I told you that we have a program here for young people who want to learn about engineering and technology? Danny's eyes widened. What kind of program? David smiled. It's called the Future Engineers Scholarship Program. We partner with schools and universities to provide educational opportunities for students who show exceptional promise in technical fields. Students in the program get access to our laboratories, mentorship from our engineers, and help with college tuition when they're ready. Rosa felt her heart skip a beat. Are you saying Danny would qualify for something like that? Not only would he qualify, David said, but I'd like to offer him a full scholarship to the program, starting immediately. The room was quiet for a moment as Rosa and Danny tried to process what David had just said. But there's more, David continued. Danny, I noticed that while your current wheelchair works well, it's still basically the same technology that was available when I was your age. How would you feel about helping us test some of our newer designs? You mean I could try out those advanced wheelchairs we saw downstairs? Danny asked, his voice full of excitement. Better than that, David said, standing up again. I'd like to give you one. David walked to his office door and opened it. Waiting in the hallway was the most advanced wheelchair Danny had ever seen. It was sleek and modern, with a frame that looked like it belonged on a race car. The wheels were large and sophisticated, and the seat looked incredibly comfortable. This is our latest model, David explained as he wheeled it into the office. It's designed for active young people who want maximum performance and reliability. It has all the latest safety features, and it's built to last for many years. Danny stared at the wheelchair in disbelief. You want to give this to me? Danny, you've already shown that you understand the importance of taking care of your equipment and that you're interested in learning how things work. I can't think of anyone who would be a better tester for our products. Rosa stood up, feeling overwhelmed. Mr. Mitchell, this is incredibly generous, but we can't possibly accept something this expensive. David held up his hand. Rosa, please, let me explain something. This company has been successful because we create products that really help people. But the best way to create those products is to work with young people who will actually use them and can tell us how to make them better. You mean Danny would be helping you improve your wheelchairs? Rosa asked. Exactly. Danny would be part of our testing program, providing feedback that helps us design better products for other young people. It's a partnership that benefits everyone. David knelt down next to Danny's current wheelchair. Besides, I owe your family a debt of gratitude. Bill told me how you've brought new energy to his shop and given him someone to share his knowledge with. Bill has been lonely since our parents died, and having Danny around has made him happier than I've seen him in years. Danny reached out to touch the new wheelchair, still not quite believing it was real. "This is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me." David smiled. "Well, there's one more thing. The scholarship program includes summer internships here at Mitchell Technologies. If you're interested, you could spend part of your summer vacations working with our engineering teams and learning about product design." Danny looked at his mother with pleading eyes. "Mom, can we do this?" Rosa looked at her son's excited face, then at David's sincere expression. She thought about how much Danny had grown and learned in just the few weeks he had been working with Bill. This opportunity could change Danny's entire future. "Yes," Rosa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, we can do this." Danny let out a whoop of joy and transferred into his new wheelchair. The difference was immediately obvious. The chair moved so smoothly, it felt like gliding, and every control was perfectly positioned for comfort and efficiency. "Thank you," Rosa said, to David, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for believing in my son." David watched Danny testing out his new wheelchair, racing around the office with pure joy on his face. "Thank you for raising such an exceptional young man, and thank Bill for bringing us all together." As they prepared to head back to the airport, that evening, Danny couldn't stop talking about everything he had seen and learned. The new wheelchair was loaded into the cargo hold of the private jet, and Danny spent the flight home making plans for all the things he wanted to learn and accomplish. Rosa watched her son's animated face and marveled at how much their lives had changed in just a few short months. It had all started with a broken wheelchair and a kind mechanic who was willing to help a stranger. Now Danny had opportunities she never could have imagined possible. When Bill met them at the airport that night, Danny immediately rolled over to him in his new wheelchair. "Bill, look what your brother gave me, and I'm going to be in a special program where I can learn about engineering and help design new wheelchairs." Bill's face lit up with pride and happiness. "That's wonderful, son. But you know what the best part is?" "What?" Danny asked. "Now you get to help other kids the same way I was able to help you. That's how kindness works. It keeps spreading from one person to another." And as they drove home that night, Rosa realized that Bill was absolutely right. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something much bigger than any of them could have imagined. Danny now had the chance to build a future where he could help others, just as Bill and David had helped him. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything.